They misjudged you from the very beginning. They thought you were someone easy to mold, easy to control, easy to guilt trip. They saw your gentleness, your kindness, your ability to listen, and they called it weakness. They saw you choose dialogue over shouting and assumed you were afraid to lose them. They saw you forgive and believed you would always come back. In their eyes, you were never a real person. You were supply, a role they wrote for you, existing only to reflect and heal the wounds they would never face. At first, you believed in the connection. You thought they were just protecting themselves, that behind every cruel act was a wounded child who had never been loved. You used your compassion to fill the emptiness they created, and you called it love. But eventually you realized you weren't loving a person, you were trying to save a bottomless pit. Every explanation, every effort, every tear was swallowed by the void, and worse, they enjoyed it. Every time you tried to prove your love, they felt stronger. Every time you lost your calm, they felt like they had won. Then one day you ran out of strength. You no longer wanted to say another word, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally saw there was nothing left to say. Every word you spoke had been twisted, every good intention used, every return only confirmed their illusion of power. So you stopped. No texts, no explanations, no reactions, just silence. And in that moment the game flipped. They never imagined you'd walk away from the table. In their mind you would always return, always need them, always be the soft one. So, when you went silent, they unraveled. Confusion, then anger, then panic. They tried to provoke you to react, but nothing. They sent messages, posted hints online, faked remorse, invented stories to make you defend yourself, but you didn't reply. And for them, that was the true nightmare, because a narcissist survives on reactions. Your reaction is their oxygen. When you're angry, they feel powerful. When you cry, they feel significant. When you explain, they feel in control. But when you're silent, they suffocate. Their world shrinks, no longer centered on them. They have nothing to hold on to. Because their power never came from within. It came from manipulating the emotions of others. And when you withdraw that energy, they lose everything. What hurts them is not losing you, it's losing influence over you. They don't mourn your presence. They mourn the ability to make you feel, to make you react. And when that power is gone, they're left empty. So they create new scripts, painting you as the villain to justify themselves, or pretending to be fine to save face. But deep down, they know. They've lost, not because you fought back, but because you stopped playing. Their power game only works if you participate. When you walk away, no arguments, no drama, no stage, they have nothing left to perform for. They may slander you, call you ungrateful, tell others you're the problem, but inside, a void begins to open. A void they will never know how to fill, because they have only ever existed through the eyes of others. And you, the one who once thought you had lost, turns out to be the one who truly won. Not by defeating them in their game, but by transcending it entirely. Because you no longer need reactions to feel valuable. You don't need to be understood or vindicated or see them regret. You just need the quiet, the peace you once feared, and in that stillness, you finally realize you are free. They never truly saw you. They only saw the version of you they believed they could control. From the very beginning, they entered the relationship with a pre-drawn map. Here's someone I can control through emotion. Here's someone I can make feel guilty. Here's someone who won't leave, no matter what I do. And sadly, back then, you were exactly that. Sensitive, understanding, believing in the good in people. You gave them chances. You explained. You humbled yourself. You tried to make them understand. And that very patience made them believe you were dependent. The inner world of a narcissist runs on a simple logic. Whoever gives them emotional reactions belongs to them. To them, your emotions are property. They hurt you, then they comfort you. They destroy, then they heal. Each cycle gives them two rewards, power and satisfaction. They believe that as long as they keep the rhythm, love, then coldness, give, then withdraw, they'll always stay on top. In their mind, you're just a mirror with no essence of your own. When they praise you, you shine. When they criticize, you dim. When they go silent, you panic. And they think that's control. But in truth, they're only playing with an illusion. What they control is not you, but a version of you they've constructed. They have no idea that behind your quiet endurance lies emotional intelligence observing everything. Behind your tears, a strength is gathering. And behind your forgiveness, boundaries are being born. When they see you endure, they mistake it for weakness. But they don't realize that those who endure the longest are often the most aware. You didn't endure because you feared losing them. You endured because you wanted to understand what was really happening. You wanted to believe there was still something to save. But one day, you no longer wanted to save. You wanted to see. And once you saw, the illusion collapsed instantly. At first, they were still confident. They saw your silence and thought, good, she'll come back. They always come back. They texted, used familiar tricks, calculated silence, vague posts on social media, casual flirting to spark jealousy. Everything was carefully designed to provoke a reaction. But this time, nothing. No message, no glance, no signal. And in that moment, for the first time, they felt fear. Not fear of losing you, but fear of losing the power they believed was eternal, the feeling they were addicted to. The feeling of being seen, heard, mirrored, suddenly vanished. The world around them became eerily quiet, like an addict waking up to find no drug left. They began to tremble. From here you can see their illusion of power begin to crack, because real power is not in making others hurt, it's in remaining peaceful no matter what others do. And when you reach that point, when you can stay calm in their storm, you've done what they never could, mastered yourself. That's the first moment the board turns. They still think they're winning, but they've already lost their position. They don't understand why the same tactics no longer work. They don't realize that while they were playing games, you were evolving. While they manipulated, you observed. While they lied, you learned the language of truth. And when you finally went silent, that truth began to speak for you. Someone who lives off others' reactions can never defeat someone who knows how to remain still. They may pretend to be in control, but they're falling. From this point on, the game begins to reverse. Slowly, but surely. No one knows exactly when you began to change. There wasn't a sudden awakening, no dramatic event. It just happened, after too many times swallowing your words, too many sleepless nights trying to understand, too many conversations where you kept speaking into the void. You grew tired. Tired enough that you no longer cared about winning or losing, right or wrong. You just wanted peace. And in that exhaustion, you finally saw what you once refused to see. They will never change, because everything they do comes not from a desire to understand you, but from a need to protect their own illusion. The moment you realized that, the game was already over, though they didn't know it yet. You began pulling your energy back to yourself. You stopped explaining. You stopped fixing. You no longer tried to make them understand your pain, because now you understood. They have no capacity for empathy, only for reflection. Every conversation was just another loop of guilt and justification. You realized the only thing you could truly change was your own perspective, and you turned it. It wasn't a big event. You just stopped replying right away. You stopped feeling responsible for their emotions. You no longer flinched at their silence, nor felt joy at their sudden kindness. Inside you, the emotional waves began to settle, like water after a storm. From the outside, no one might have noticed, but inside, it was a quiet revolution. You stopped participating. A narcissist senses energetic shifts quickly. They knew you were pulling away, but they didn't know why. They tried every familiar button, a sarcastic remark, an unexpected compliment, a long, silent treatment, hoping you'd react, but you didn't. Not out of revenge, but because you no longer had the impulse to. You had seen the full picture, and you no longer wished to stand on that chessboard. For the first time, they felt lost. They tried to start over, not out of love, but to restore their sense of control. But you were no longer interested in new beginnings. You had seen the pattern. Warmth, chaos, guilt, reconciliation, repeat. And once you recognize a pattern, you naturally step out of it. They said the same things that once softened your heart. I'm really changing this time. No one understands me like you. I just want to talk. Once those words would have melted you. Now they just echoed hollow, because you knew if someone truly changes, they don't need to convince you. They'd stay quiet and show it. But narcissists don't know silence. They need noise to drown their emptiness. You looked at them, and for the first time, you didn't feel anger, just clarity. a clarity so sharp it brought calm. Your emotions no longer swung between extremes. You didn't feel weak for forgiving, nor strong for leaving. You simply felt light, as though you'd set down a burden you hadn't realized you'd been carrying for years. Of course, they won't accept defeat. To them, everything is a power struggle. To lose is to be erased, and their greatest fear is exactly that, to be erased from someone's memory. So they start testing you, not directly, but in subtle, calculated ways. Vague posts online, texting your friends, showing up in familiar places. None of it is coincidence, it's strategy. They want to know, do you still look at me? Still talk about me? Still think about me? But by now you've moved into another level of awareness. You no longer need to win. You don't need to prove you've moved on. You simply don't care anymore. And to someone who survives on attention, that indifference is the ultimate blow. It throws them into silent panic. They may appear busy, happy, successful, but inside they're collapsing. What they've lost isn't just you. They've lost the mirror that reflected their ego. In your gaze, they once felt valuable, believed in the better version of themselves they fabricated. When that gaze disappears, they are forced to face their true reflection. Distorted, hollow, stripped of charm. They'll never admit it. Instead, they'll try to rebuild the illusion, find someone new, repaint their image, pretend they're fine. But you know, no one can outrun themselves forever. The further they run, the bigger the void becomes. And you, after years trapped in emotional loops, finally find quiet. You no longer need anyone to validate your worth. You don't need to be seen to know you exist, and that's something they'll never understand. You didn't defeat them. You transcended the game. In their world, everything runs on reaction. One person gets angry, the other must respond. One goes silent, the other must chase. When you stop feeding that system, it collapses. They'll call you cold, heartless, different. But the truth is, you simply become conscious. And consciousness, to someone who needs control, always feels like betrayal. The moment you stepped off the board, you didn't just free yourself, you dismantled the structure they depended on. They'll try to rebuild it with someone else, but they'll never experience again what they did with you. Because no one can replace the energy that once made them feel real, the very energy they destroyed. He walked away in silence, needing no proof, no statement, no apology. Your calm became its own declaration. The game is over. And when they finally realize it, they'll understand. They misjudged you from the very beginning. At this stage, they usually choose one of two paths: pretending to be fine or quietly striking back. Those who choose to pretend will try to rebuild their image. They post smiling photos, talk about freedom, about happiness after the breakup. But if you've known them long enough, you can see it's just a fresh coat of paint over a cracking wall. They're not really fine. They're just trying to repaint themselves before anyone notices the fracture. Those who choose retaliation begin their usual tactics, spreading rumors, twisting stories, using others to plant seeds of doubt. It's not because they hate you. It's because they need to control the narrative. If they can't control you, they'll at least try to control how others see you. But what they never expect is this: the prolonged silence is the one punishment they can't survive. For normal people, silence is space for healing. For the narcissist, silence is hell. In that silence, they start to hear the echoes of everything they've run from, their own smallness, insignificance, abandonment. They have no skill to sit quietly with themselves because inside them is an empty room. So, when there's no one left to blame, they begin to fall apart. Their breakdown happens quietly, but in order. Stage 1. Denial. They tell themselves, it's fine, she'll come back. Stage 2. Anxiety. When you don't, they start to think maybe she's met someone else. Jealousy and the fear of being replaced drive them mad. Stage 3. Projection. Instead of facing that fear, they throw it outward. They tell others you cheated, that you're fake, that you're just like them. It's the only way to avoid seeing themselves. Meanwhile, you stay silent, and that drives them even crazier. Because in their mind, your silence doesn't mean you stop loving, it means you despise them. And they know that feeling well, because they used to control others with it. Now they're tasting their own poison. The longer the panic lasts, the more erratic their behavior becomes. One day they text like nothing happened. I miss you, can we talk? The next, they post something vague implying you're the villain. The next day, they try to act mature, as if they've moved on. There's no clear plan, only frantic reactions dressed in pride. This is the stage where you are most vulnerable. Because sometimes, compassion makes you remember the version of them they once pretended to be, the fragile one, the one who could say sorry. But don't forget, a narcissist doesn't apologize to end a mistake. They apologize to reopen access. Every word now has a purpose, to check if any door is still open. And the moment you answer, the game restarts. Staying silent now isn't indifference, it's discipline. You have to face your own longing, your confusion, without escaping through them. But that very discipline is what separates the free from the bound. Because if you can overcome the urge to react, you'll see what they never can. The emptiness you once feared isn't as terrifying as you thought. In that emptiness, you begin to come alive again. As for them, once panic has consumed everything inside, they fall into false silence. They disappear not because they've let go, but because they're calculating. They watch from afar through social media, mutual friends, waiting to see if you're truly fine. If you look happy, they're enraged. If you're silent, they're anxious. If you seem sad, they feel comforted, because it means they still have influence. In every scenario, they remain obsessed. But when you continue not reacting, not posting to prove, not faking sadness or forced joy, when you simply live, quietly and truthfully, they begin to run out of fuel. Panic turns into emptiness, and that's when their mask begins to crack. Those who once believed they were stable, charming, magnetic, begin to reveal the fractures. The rough tone, the contradictions in their stories, the dark energy they carry. People around them, once enchanted, start stepping back. Their audience shrinks. And you, the former lead in their drama, have withdrawn the spotlight. The panic behind their silence is no longer strategy, it's a sentence. They're now forced to taste what they inflicted on others: isolation, doubt, insecurity, and internal collapse. Meanwhile, for the first time, you experience peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. You no longer need them to admit fault. You don't need closure. You just need this quiet, to breathe, to realize peace was never out of reach. It was only hidden beneath their power games. Every game has limits. Eventually, even those who think they can manipulate the whole world face a simple truth: no one cares anymore. No audience, no reaction, no scapegoat, just the free fall into the void they created themselves. The collapse of a narcissist's power doesn't happen in a day. It's a slow decay of the ego, like a wall crumbling from rain that's been seeping in for years. At first, they fight back. They seek new supply, someone new to prove they're still desirable, still wanted. They act busy, optimistic, full of projects. But inside, the mask starts to fall, piece by piece. You can see it in the smallest details. Their words become more defensive. Their need for validation grows. They demand trust without earning it. They contradict themselves. And though they still smile and shine in public, people around them feel something strange. Their energy is cold, tense, artificial. When new supply fails to fill the void, their energy begins to drain. The pride that once served as armor becomes a burden. Every lie needs another to cover it. Every image they create requires another performance to maintain it. And the more they perform, the more exhausted they become. This exhaustion isn't physical, it's psychological. Like someone forced to keep smiling while empty inside. They feel everything collapsing but don't understand why. Because in truth, they are collapsing. Not because you left, but because they have nothing left to reflect. In the eyes of the new person, they can't recreate what they once had with you. The feeling of being understood without words, admired without effort. The new person lacks your depth, your empathy, your emotional richness. So every charm tactic they use falls flat. That's when they realize the very things they once dismissed in you, your depth, your honesty, your patience, are exactly what they will never find again. The harder they fight, the more they lose. They start blaming the world. No one understands me. Everyone's fake. No one's trustworthy. But the truth is, it's they who are fake, and the world is simply mirroring that back. Yet in their mind, they can't admit it. They must believe they're the victim, because if they don't, they'll have to face the truth they've avoided all their life. They are the cause. Then the body begins to react. insomnia, racing heart, erratic energy, irritability, depression. For many, this is narcissistic collapse, the breakdown of the false self. Their defenses overload, the mask stops working, the ego is exposed without protection. Everything they once used to escape, work, sex, money, power, attention, loses its effect. They feel no joy, no spark of life. And that is the natural sentence for anyone who lives off reflections instead of reality. Meanwhile, you, their former source of energy, are no longer the same. You find no pleasure in their downfall. You simply see the truth. Everyone must face themselves sooner or later, and if they refuse to learn, life will teach through pain. You don't seek revenge, exposure, or satisfaction, because you understand the greatest punishment for them is losing power over you. Their collapse unfolds as your stability rises. While they spiral, you begin to find rhythm again, sleeping well, eating with appetite, reading, having honest conversations, laughing freely. You realize that what they called ordinary is what you dreamed of all along during those chaotic years. No manipulation, no emotional forecasting. You finally see that ordinary is freedom. You no longer need their confession. You no longer need their remorse, because now you understand you don't need closure from someone who was never open. The closure comes when you accept that they simply have nothing to give. And once you accept that, you're no longer defensive. You don't go no contact to fight. You go no contact to protect your peace. That's the real difference. Before, your silence was to make them realize their fault. Now, your silence is because you've realized the lesson. As their influence fades, they panic. They try to come back just to see if you still care. But this time, they can't reach you. Not because you blocked them, but because you no longer vibrate on the same frequency. You've changed frequencies. Your energy no longer emits fear, longing, or regret. It radiates peace. And to them, peace is an empty space they can't enter. That's when their power collapses completely. They realize they can no longer affect you. They can shout, slander, play the victim. It doesn't matter. They're swinging at air, and then the most brutal thing happens, they're forgotten. Not because you force yourself to forget, but because you no longer need to remember. Someone who once occupied every corner of your mind becomes just a faint memory. Like an old film you no longer feel the urge to re-watch. Meanwhile, they, left behind in a world they no longer understand, begin repeating the cycle with someone new. But no one is like you. Everything feels dull, lifeless, and slowly they realize, too late, that what they called power was nothing more than dependency disguised as control. You, the one who was once manipulated, become the one who is now sovereign. Not because you fought back, but because you learned you don't need to prove anything. In this game, checkmate doesn't come from the final move. It comes when you stop moving. When you step off the board, there is no game left for them to win. When they look around and see only emptiness, they finally understand they were the ones trapped in their own game. When they collapse, you don't feel triumph, you feel clarity. Clarity that the chaos was never yours to carry. Clarity that real love never needs to save anyone. It only needs to see things as they are. And that clarity marks the birth of inner sovereignty, something they will never possess. At first, you feel empty. After leaving the emotional storm, you no longer feel pain, but not yet joy. It's like stepping out of a loud room, your ears still ringing, your heart still racing. Then you realize it's not emptiness, it's space. Space to breathe, to feel, to simply be yourself without defense. You no longer have to guess what someone else is thinking. You no longer check your phone every time the silence lasts too long. For the first time in years, silence no longer threatens you. It comforts you. You begin to notice the small things you once overlooked. Mornings without messages dragging you in. Nights without apologizing for your emotions. You start remembering what used to make you quietly happy. Reading a page of a book, walking slowly, drinking water without rushing. Those ordinary things move you deeply, because you realize how long you lived in a state where you had to ask permission just to have peace. This freedom is not loud. It's not the dramatic kind that shouts, "I've changed my life." It's the quiet kind that comes from within, when you know that no one has the right to shape your emotions. But you no longer use no contact as a tactic, you embody it at the energetic level. Not because you hate them, but because you no longer need them to feel whole.